I'd like to say good evening to everyone.
Good evening.
I called and talked with my brother a little bit ago, Jerry, and asked him how he's doing. He said, just burning up. He said it was 99 degrees down there. The heat index was over 110. I said, boy, am I glad I'm here.
I'm walking right in here.
Yeah, you're the ones driving south. Yeah, that's, Patsy and I have talked about going down there, but I think we're going to wait till about October.
We're free to.
We're in the book of Acts again. We're continuing chapter 16 tonight. Acts chapter 16 tonight. Continuing studying on Paul's missionary trips. And we'll see another name that's prominent in his ministry and coming up here real quick in this chapter. It says, Then came he to Derbe and Lystra, and behold, a certain disciple was there named Timothy, the son of a certain woman who was Jewish and believed, but his father was a Greek. Now, studying a little bit about Timothy here, Paul called him his son in faith. And he was very loyal to Paul and was really helped out in his ministry. In reading some of the stuff, we'll see that Timothy probably was with him on his trip more than anybody else. We always talk about Paul and Cyrus being together and Barnabas being with him, but Timothy actually was with him longer and more than anyone else. And even into the point that when he was in prison the first time in Rome, that Timothy also was over there and visiting, was also put in prison for a little while. So they have a long history together, and so he grew up here in this area, and it says that his mother was Jewish and his father was Greek. Now, in their belief, if your mother or father was Jewish, then you was considered a Jew later on. And actually, in this time, really it was not knowing how they really felt. A lot of them, if you was like Samaritans, where they were part Jewish and part others, that they really didn't like them, but that kind of changed over the first centuries of the church to where, and it's not clear in this part of the time that if they still believe that, but we know that a couple of things about Timothy. One is, and just this first one, is that his mother was Jewish and his father was Greek. It says, which was well reported of by the brethren that were there in Lystra and Iconium. So he must have been very faithful. His mother was another place it talks about him reminding what his mother and his grandmother taught him. He must have come up in the Jewish faith. Even though it was customary for the wife to submit to the husband's will, it would seem as if the father, being Greek, didn't mind him being raised in the Jewish faith. So you see that happening here. So he says, him would Paul have to go forth with him, and took and circumcised him because of the Jews which were in those quarters, for they knew all that his father was a Greek. Now, understanding that Paul wanted Timothy to be circumcised, and the reason why was that he was considered a Jew, and he hadn't been, but to minister to the other Jews, or for the other Jews to listen to him, he would have to be circumcised. Because there was a big difference between the Jewish people that was and was not circumcised. So for them to believe and follow after him and listen to his words. Now that's a little bit different than what Paul just just a few chapters ago, went in and argued why did the Jewish people want the new converts, the Gentiles, to Christianity, while they shouldn't be circumcised. So there's a little bit of a difference. See, those were Gentiles that was coming in to Christianity. They wasn't coming into Judaism. They were coming in to Christianity. So that was a little bit different of an argument that Paul had here.
A little hard for me to understand.
Why one and not the other?
Well, yeah, Paul had a pretty tough stand on that.
Yeah.
And then when I read this, I wondered about that.
Well, Timothy, though, was Jewish, and they knew to reach the Jewish people and to preach to them and help convert them to Christianity.
Yeah, but if you go out here to do something that you don't believe is part of it, to show them that don't, I mean,
Well, and part of the history again is the wife would submit to the husband. So the husband being Greek, he would not want his son to be circumcised after the Jewish faith. But Timothy being of age, then he can choose to do what he wanted.
well, I'm sure that was to keep peace, no doubt.
It would have been. It would have been to keep the
I'm
peace.
sure of that. But
Yeah.
I just kind of read that and I thought, no, that doesn't sound like Paul.
Yeah. Yep. It was different. That was very much done to keep the peace among the Jews. It said, as they went through the city, they delivered them the decree for to keep. Now, the decree was what John was just talking about, was that the Gentiles that converted didn't have to be circumcised. That were ordained of the apostles and elders, which was in Jerusalem. So that was the decree that them being converted, they did not have to be circumcised. So they went out to everywhere they went, and so were the churches established in the faith and increased in number daily. It said, now when they had gone throughout, and I know I don't know these names, I'm going to get them right, Paraguay, and the regions of Galatian, and were forbidden of the Holy Spirit to preach the word in Asia. Now these two areas made up what the Romans considered Asia. It wasn't a full continent of Asia. It was just what the Roman controlled in Asia. See, the thing about all of this that was going on in Jesus' time, all the traveling they did, even Jesus, when he went into Egypt to escape the decree to kill everyone, that was still all Roman territory. So when they're talking about all this traveling they're doing, they're still in Roman territory. So when they're talking about all of Asia, it's not all of Asia as we know it, it's just what the Roman territory covered, empire. It says, and after they had, so the Holy Spirit here, they were following after, they were being led by the Spirit. I think it's sometimes probably hard for us to imagine being led by the Spirit that much. But you understand, they spent much more time in prayer than we probably, in the day, than we probably do in a week.
Their life depends on it.
Yes, because they were always being threatened. Their life did depend on it. So they spent a lot of time in prayer. They spent a lot of time in searching after what God had for them to do. So the Holy Spirit said, no, not here. Now, I don't know the particular reason why yet, but they told him not to do it. So after they were come to Master, they decided to go into Bethlehem, but the Spirit suffered them not. So again, here's another direction. They had went a little ways, and they said, well, let's go this direction. The Spirit again said, no. And they passed by Masra and came to Taurus. And these are all cities. You can study them out and look in the ancient world. And I got into one of my history commentaries that I have, and I was reading it, and it brings all this out about these cities, and I thought it was quite boring. Again, as they come in here, they were in this city, and it says in verse 9, and a vision appeared to Paul in the night. Now, a lot of people has visions and dreams that I believe that the Lord gives them. I've had some myself that I knew as soon as I had them and woke up that it was something that the Lord was telling. One of them I couldn't understand for a while. Well, I guess I really couldn't understand. I just wasn't accepting it. I know I've shared with some of you here that I had a dream one night that the Lord gave me a flashlight. And it wasn't one of those big mag flashlights that you could hit people with. It was one of just a little old bright pin light. And he said, leave. And I didn't know. Well, I kind of knew what he was doing. And I didn't understand. He told me, that that was in my calling to preach, and I was kind of denying it at the time. So he came to me in that dream and gave me that flashlight. And meaning that and told me that there was people that was in a building that was lost, and I knew the way out. That I was to go in and to guide them out of that building. Now, I know just as well as it was, I act like I didn't, but that was one of the conversations I had with Boo Mullins. I called him up and I said, Boo, I had this dream. He said, you know what it means? I said, yes, but I don't want to. And so I believe that he speaks to everyone, people in dreams, not everyone, but a lot of people. He still gives them visions. He said, and a vision appeared to Paul at night. So he had a dream of a vision. There stood a man of Macedonia and prayed him, saying, come over unto Macedonia and help us. Now we know why the Spirit told Paul not to go into these areas. Not to go into, there's someone that needs your help. And so here we see his call here to Macedonia. So we see all of these times before that the Spirit told him not to go over and stay here in this part. So when Paul attempted to swing through these other areas, they told him no. So the Spirit gave him this vision and had him to come back into this place, or into this place that he needed to go. And after he had seen the vision, immediately he endured to go into Macedonia, assuring gathering that the Lord had called us for to preach the gospel unto them. So Paul immediately got up and went, but I noticed something else in this verse that if you read by pretty quickly, you may not notice it. Who did he say went? The writer here. Who is writing this, by the way? Luke. Luke is the one that's writing this history out. He is writing it as a defense when Paul was in prison. To the Romans, he was writing this history out of what Paul had done in the early church as a defense of why he should live. So Luke is writing this, and who does he say that the Lord had called? Us. So here's where Luke joins in and comes into the ministry here. I thought that was something. It's easy to read over that. He says, therefore, loosing from Taurus, we came into a straight course to Samaria, and the next day to Neapolis. Now, these two cities were port cities. This was somewhere that they would have left this Taurus, sailed to Samathra, and next day into Neapolis. These are where they would have sailed on the ship to these two cities. Now, something else just came to my mind. I'm going to throw this one in for free. It won't cost you a thing. when I saw the word straight there. And I know I'm not always able to come up with great things, but somebody asked me the other day, said, have y'all named your church yet? Have you formed your new church and named it? And I said, yes. They said, oh, that's too bad. She said, I have the perfect name for y'all's new church. You need to call it the Livesmore Straight and Narrow. I said, well, I couldn't come up with that myself, but that would have been a good name, wouldn't it?
Oh, yeah.
I think we did all right.
I think we did all right. But anyway, Paul is sailed to these two cities, and they arrived. It takes 2 days. Usually the Samothrace is a city that they would have gotten off the ship, ate, spent the night, and then sailed on the next day. It says, and from thence to Philippi, which is the chief city of the part of Macedonia, and a colony, and we were in that city abiding certain days. Now Philippi, of course, was a city here in this city in which the father of Alexander the Great established and enlarged, or didn't establish, but he enlarged and fortified this city several years before, 4 centuries, it says, before Christ came on the scene. And of course, it's located in the eastern part of Asia, and is part of the Roman road that they had. And it was a very important city, and we can see that it's mentioned in other parts of the Bible as well. So it was a very big city. It was an important city because it was a trade city. There was a lot of people coming in and out. And the reason why they mention some of these cities and being so important is the people that was coming in and out of the city will be hearing Paul and these other people preach. And when they hear this word and being preached, they would leave and carry it to other parts of the world. So that is one of the things that really helped the gospel to spread so quickly. And on the Sabbath, the city was there. And on the Sabbath, we went out of the city by a riverside, where prayers was wont to be made, and we sat down and spake unto the women which resorted thither. Now, the thing about these cities, they didn't have a very large Jewish, usually, colony in them. They wasn't of course, as big. For the Jewish people, and if they didn't have a place for them to meet, it was often usually for them to meet by the riverside. And one of the reasons they believed that was a tradition for them was it goes back into the Old Testament. When they were taken into captivity, they wasn't allowed to have their synagogues or their churches. And so they would, a lot of times when they would meet by the river. And so if someone came upon them and wondered what they were doing there, especially the women, would say, well, that's where they cleaned their clothes. So that way they wouldn't get into trouble for worshiping and doing the things that they did. So it was common for them to meet by the river if they didn't have a synagogue to go in. And a certain woman named Lydia, a seller of purple of the city of Tyre, which worshipped God, heard us, whose heart the Lord opened, and she attended unto the things which were spoken of Paul. So here was a lady, and this area was also known for their purple material. So this was a lady who helped make them. The women usually had an industry, and the men also worked it. But here is a lady who apparently was a seller of this purple material that was out. Purple was a sign of royalty. It was very rare to have purple, and so it was something that was only the very wealthy could afford. But here's a lady, Lydia, who, hearing of the things that was going on, her heart was open to the word, and she believed. It says that when she was baptized, so she went as far as to be baptized. And her household, she besought us, saying, If ye have judged me to be faithful to the Lord, come into my house and abide there. And she constrained us. So a couple of things that to notice in this verse was that it says that her house, that she was baptized and her household was baptized. So, and after believing, she wanted to hear more of Paul. You know, Paul didn't have a place to stay, and those that was following after her. Now, she must have been a lady of some means, that if she could afford to have the entire traveling party to stay with her. A lot of them had gated areas around their house, and would often have people that would come and stay with them inside the gated areas, because that would be under their protection. And some, a lot of them stayed, depending on the weather, would stay on the roof of the house, which would usually have steps up the side of it and a place to sleep on the top of it. So here she had Paul and his company to come out and stay with us. And it came to pass, as we went to prayer, a certain damsel possessed with a spirit of divination met us, which brought her masters much gain by soothsaying. So here comes a young lady that was possessed of a devil or a demon of some kind, and she could sense things and see things through that demonic possession. And so the people that was over her made money from her by charging people for her to say things. But it says, and the same followed Paul and us, and cried, saying, These men are the servants of the Most High God, which show unto us the way of salvation. Isn't that something? Even the demons know who the followers of Jesus Christ is. Folks, if you're a follower of Jesus Christ, believe me, we still have demons in the world today. I don't think that some of them present themselves as the way that maybe this one did, and others that we've seen in the Bible. Remember the man in the tombs, how he was possessed. Mary, that followed after Jesus, had demons that was cast out from her. And I think we still have them today. They may not sound the same or look the same, but trust me, we have them in people today. So not only did they recognize the followers of Jesus Christ then, they recognize the followers of Jesus Christ today. So when they recognize you today, those are the ones I think that work so hard to destroy you if you have a good witness for Jesus today. If you're a follower after and you try to spread the gospel and you go out, I see videos every now and then of these street preachers when they're out, and people will run up on them and they will yell at them in their face, and they will scream at them, and they'll do all of this stuff. I think those are demon-possessed people who don't want to hear the preaching of Jesus Christ and wants to stop it at all costs. So this woman, she was following after this young girl, knowing that they showed us the way of salvation.
I think this Lydia, that might be the reason that stopped sending this direction. Because that church, that was the first church established. She was the first convert and the first church established in the European age.
He was. Lydia was the first, and I meant to say that when we went by. She was the first person that is recorded that Paul baptized that wasn't a Jewish person. It was very important for the establishment of this church.
I believe they started a church out of her house.
Yes, they did. They did start this church out of her house by all these companions that came around. Lydia was apparently must have been very well off that she was able to start this. It says, "And this did she many days." Now, I don't know how about you guys, but if someone followed me around for many days, yelling that after, how did Paul keep his composure?
He didn't after a while.
After a while, it says, "But Paul, being grieved, turned and said to the Spirit, I command thee in the name of Jesus Christ to come out of her. And he came out the same hour." Now, Paul was very busy and probably had a crowd. You know, so many times we've seen Jesus going along and people hollering stuff after him, and even some of the disciples even come up and said, you know, make them go away, make them leave us. But Jesus knew that what they needed was him. But you see, Paul here, after a while, for many days, they went by and they did this, and finally he had enough and told, get it, come out of it.
Then trouble started.
Now that's when the trouble in Philippi started. And when her master saw that the hope of their gain was gone, in other words, they could make no money off of her now. She didn't have the visions of the Spirit to do this. They caught Paul and Silas and drew them into the marketplace and to the rulers, and brought them to the magistrates, saying, "These men, being Jews, do exceedingly trouble our city." Well, they wasn't worried about them troubling the city. They were worried because they got rid of their money. Their way of making money, their gain, that's what they was upset about. So they had to come up with a false, something to accuse them of, so they could get the people on their side. So they troubled the city. And they said, "And teach customs which are not lawful for us to receive, neither to observe, being Romans." In other words, we are Romans, and these Jewish men are coming in here, they're upsetting everything. They're trying to tell us to do things that's not lawful for us to do. Because we're Romans and they're Jews. And the magistrate rose up together against them, and the magistrates rent off their clothes and commanded to beat them. And when they had laid many stripes upon them, they cast them into prison, charging the jailer to keep them safely. Who, having received such a charge, thrust them into the inner prison and made their feet fast in the shackles. Or stocks, stocks. So here we have the magistrates have made their ruling to cast them into the prison, put a man over them, and make sure they don't get away. So they cast them into the other parts of the prison, put chains on them, put the stocks on them. And what did Paul and Silas do?
I prayed, sing.
"And at midnight Paul and Silas prayed and sang praises unto God, and the prisoners heard them." I think that is something that's very important. I think of this, contrast this to just a few chapters ago when we read about Peter being in prison. Peter was in prison in Jerusalem. And they had him in there, and they had him in prison. And what did Peter do? He slept. Can you imagine being in prison? Both of these men, one slept and one sang praises. So apparently they wasn't too worried about being in prison, was it? They wasn't too worried. But Paul and Silas, they sang praises. I believe that those guards that was guarding them could hear what was going on. Can you imagine the typical person that was in that prison in that situation was probably crying and whimpering and asking for help, and here these two men was praying and singing praises.
One thing about it,
Oh,
when God sent the earthquake out,
That was something different, wasn't it? And suddenly there was a great earthquake, so that the foundations of the prison were shaken, and immediately all the doors were opened, and everyone's bands were loosened.
how that can happen.
Well,
yes.
it was something a little more supernatural going on, wasn't it?
I believe it was.
I think there was something that was happening that they hadn't seen. So here was this earthquake that happened. These guards was put in charge. Now, if you think back on Peter, when he was in prison, what happened to the guards when the magistrates come by and they were gone? They killed them. They killed the guards that were supposed to be watching them. Here, these prisoners, and Peter was snuck out. So here, all this sudden, the earthquake happens. The doors come open. Their bands that was on them is loosened. And the keeper of the prison awakened out of his sleep, and seeing the prison doors open, he drew out his sword,
Yeah, what is?
and would have killed himself, supposing that the prisoners had been fled. He knew what the punishment was for not keeping your job, not keeping the prisoners, not keeping things the way that you're ordered. He knew, because Peter had already went through it, but the sentence is death upon them for not doing their job properly. So as he was getting ready to kill himself, assuming that they were all gone, but Paul cried with a loud voice, saying, "Do thyself no harm, for we are all here." In other words, they didn't run away. I'm probably going to guess that your spirit told them, just stay put. Just stay put. So this prisoner seeing this, these are men who sang praises when they were in stocks, and when they had an opportunity to leave, they didn't. What is wrong with these men? Must be something different about them. It says, then he called for a light, and sprang in and came trembling, and fell down before Paul and Silas. Something different about these men. And brought them out and said, "Sirs, what must I do to be saved?"
Question.
What must I do to be saved? In other words, he's seen that there's a difference in them, and he wanted that difference. He wanted to know what he needed to do to be more like them. So he wouldn't be afraid when something happens, and not run away from trouble when it comes. What must I do to be saved? And they said, "Believe on the Lord Jesus Christ, and thou shalt be saved in thine house." And they spoke unto him the words of the Lord, and to all that were in his house. Now, if I found this to be important, and he took them that same hour of the night, and washed their stripes, and was baptized he and all his straightway. Now,
And then he healed her. He cleansed her wounds.
yeah. This passage and others in here is one of them that a lot of, and the United Methodist is one of them, which I did not ever believe in baptizing babies. And they said that these whole households were baptized that would include babies, and then that's the reason why you do it. But if you go back and look at this passage just a little bit more,
The Methodist sprinkled.
well, they sprinkle, but yeah, that's something else. But he says here that it says, "And they spake unto the words of the Lord, and to all that were in his house. Now, babies wouldn't understand what he's saying. They wouldn't have the capability of hearing, even the younger ones. I mean, they may hear the word, but they wouldn't understand it. But it says, and they spake unto the word of the Lord unto all them that were in his house. And he took them the same hour of the evening, washed their stripes, and he was baptized, he and his straightway. And when he had brought them into his house, he set meat before them, and rejoiced, believing in God with all his house.
Something good come out of it, didn't it?
Something come out of it that was totally unexpected. You see how God uses what we think may be the worst circumstances that we could be in? You can see how we think that we're in the worst possible place that we could be. But God can use it to reach somebody. So when we think that, I think sometimes the sicknesses that we go through, maybe at the hospital stays or the situations we get in, how instead of looking at them as woe is me and how bad can it get, Lord, what is it that you want me to do? Maybe there's somebody in the bed next to you, or somebody that comes in, or somebody you see in physical therapy. Larry's been going through physical therapy going to be now. Maybe there's somebody there that needs to hear about the Lord. Him saying, the Lord brought me through it, maybe enough to get somebody curious to want to listen to what does he mean. The Lord uses our situations that he puts us in to reach those that are around us. If he met Paul on the street, listened to it, he may not believe anything he said. But when he lived it and seen it, it was different. That's the reason I always say that our living sacrifice or our living testimony that we have is more important than any words that we have. And when it was day, the magistrate sent the sergeant saying, let those men go. And the keeper of the prison told this saying to Paul, the magistrates had sent to let you go, now therefore depart and go in peace.
Right.
See how the Lord used these men in something that a lot of us would think, how in the world am I getting out of this? To use it to reach people, and then they just let them go. He said, but Paul said unto them, they have beaten us openly. I like this. Uncondemned, being Romans, and have cast us into prison. And now do they thrust us out privily? Nay, verily, but let them come themselves and fetch us out. See, it has never been mentioned anywhere in here. Did Paul in defense say, when they said that these Jewish men, see, he was also part Roman and part Jewish. He nowhere in here did he tell them that he was a Roman. It says, then the sergeant told these words unto the magistrate, and they feared. Uh-oh, we did something wrong. When they heard that they were Romans. I'm going to guess that these magistrates didn't know that. And they feared the Roman soldiers and the Roman government that here we did something we shouldn't have done.
Well, they took a one-sided thing. They didn't have no proof.
They didn't have no defense or anything to it. And they came and besought them and brought them out and desired them to depart out of the city. So they did exactly what Paul wanted them to do. You tell them come and fetch us and themselves make them come and do it. Boy, they did when they heard they were And they went out of the prison and entered into the house of Lydia. And when they had seen the brethren, they comforted them and departed. How about that?
Happy as a coat in the cold.
They had have more people saved, made a great report into Lydia, and then they left. Anyone have anything tonight?